Filibuster. When you woke up this morning, did you purposely say, I'm going to confine myself to a box? Or do you just avoid putting any conscious thought into today? When you're busy going at it, literally or figuratively, do you ever find yourself pausing for a moment to realize what's going on? Or are you just reacting? When you hear the saying, may I have your attention please, do you continue as you were, or do you consider the information you're about to receive might actually be valuable? When I was growing up, my mother used to ask me to do things, and sometimes her reasoning was, because I said so. Looking back, I wish perhaps I took the time to pause, think, and consider the ramifications of my choices. Good Friday to you. Today is Friday, October 28th, 2016. This is episode number 35 of Pause, Think, Consider. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen today. For those of you that will take the time and listen to today's episode, it would be great for you to go onto our Facebook page, Pause, Think, Consider, and share your thoughts. I think this topic, which is becoming widely debated, widely recognized, and it would be great to get everyone's feedback on the topic. So please go to our Facebook page, and then under this post, leave a comment. Share your thoughts. For today's episode, we are discussing paying student athletes. As I mentioned, this is a very hot topic in the news right now. There's been several recent events that have brought it to national attention. And there's been a string of events that have occurred. The first one being that really got this ball rolling was by former UCLA basketball player Ed O'Bannon and former Arizona State quarterback Sam Keller, who essentially submitted a lawsuit, trying to being more of a class action lawsuit, against EA Sports specifically, suing for what is often abbreviated as NIL, but name, image, and likeness, and that EA Sports was leveraging for their NCAA football, NCAA basketball video games replicated images and the name and the likeness of these individuals without their explicit permission. Now, as most of you are aware, student athletes are not allowed to get paid. They're not allowed to make any kind of an income as a result of being an athlete aside from their scholarship, because it is amateurism. And when they begin getting paid, they have forfeited their amateurism and therefore their eligibility to play collegiate sports. Now, there are other collegiate entities in which allow some flexibility in eligibility. But we're talking specifically for these individuals and additional individuals that I will talk about at the Division I NCAA level. We're not talking about Division III. We're not talking about the NAIA. We're not talking about the subdivision of football. We're talking about mainstream Division I basketball and football specifically. So most recently, this happened October 6, 2016, because it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, or it was on the doorstep of the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court, which gets thousands of cases submitted to them in hopes of being heard, denied listening to the case. So as a result, the Supreme Court would not hear the case of the NCAA versus Ed O'Bannon and the entire lawsuit of essentially trying to get student athletes paid. Because there's a widely adopted opinion that the NCAA and all the revenue that they get in stating that they are a non-for-profit organization is seen as a hypocrisy as a result of that. Then you have individuals like Ed O'Bannon who are then taken advantage of in his opinion and not compensated for it, and they believe that is wrong. So it was settled in June 2014. EA Sports was sued, and they settled for $60 million. There was roughly 24,932. That was the estimate. The number of checks that were going to be sent, with the average being around $1,237 and the max of $7,622 being distributed to current and former NCAA athletes. The caveat on that was that the pay, because the lowest athlete received $58, but they actually opted out of the lawsuit against the NCAA and EA Sports. But the lowest was for, I believe, $112. And this was all based on how many years you played and a few other factors. So those athletes that participated for 5 years were compensated more. Some of these were professional athletes that have already moved on to the NFL or the NBA. Others still in college. And some have not played since they graduated. So those are the recent lawsuits and court litigations. Then we have two other individuals. A guy by the name of Josh Rosen, quarterback for UCLA football, who made an Instagram post, which was deleted roughly an hour after it was posted, essentially commenting on the fact when UCLA signed a 15-year, $280 million apparel deal. He posted on Instagram with a photo that stated, "We're still amateurs though. Gotta love nonprofits. #NCAA." He's not the first to come out and make statements like that. But the real individual that sparked my attention, not that Ed O'Bannon didn't, or Josh Rosen didn't, but feeling compelled to give my opinions on the topic was Nigel Hayes. The interesting thing, my girlfriend Jean, from the state of Wisconsin, and we are actually going to attend, when I go back for Christmas, my first ever University of Wisconsin Badgers basketball game. And I will see said Nigel Hayes on the court. So the background story on Nigel Hayes. He is a senior, we'll call him a star basketball player. He had the ability to come out. Not out of the closet, but to come out and enter the NBA draft early. He went through, which thankfully, and I'm in complete agreement of this, thankfully the process is one in which student athletes are now able to go through essentially I won't say recruiting process, but a scouting process, which they get 3 days or something like that to perform and get feedback from the NBA telling them prior to being drafted roughly where they would land. And so for an athlete like Nigel Hayes, who, playing for Wisconsin, has been in 2 Final Fours, 2 national championship games. And now the leader, preseason player of the year nominee of the Big Ten Conference. All those collegiate accolades, and yet they essentially told him, you know what, Nigel? We think you could use another year. You are projected, and this is the great thing that the NBA and the NCAA has collaborated on, is they give them the projections and they allow them, so long as they do not declare or hire an agent. Once you hire an agent, your amateur status goes bye-bye. So as long as you don't do that, you're allowed to get this information. Essentially your report card. And the report card came back, you're going to be potentially late second round to undrafted. It is in your best interest to go back to school. And so he did. Which it makes you wonder, as a basketball and sports fan, and this is a completely different topic and different debate about if said rule was in place back when high school athletes were allowed to declare. How many of those washed out high school athletes would have actually come out? They still may have. The Darius Miles and the Andrew Bynums of the world. Everybody looks at LeBron and Kobe and Kevin Garnett. And then you look at Brandon Jennings, who did something completely different. Completely different. He decided, you know what? I'm going to graduate high school. And then instead of going to college, I'm going to go play overseas. I'm going to forfeit my amateur status. And I'm going to go play professionally overseas for a year and then enter the draft. And you know what? He rolled the dice and he won. I think he was drafted like 8th overall, 12th overall. First round draft pick. And you have to be in the first round. At least in basketball's sake and Nigel's sake. because then you've got guaranteed contracts. Of course, the higher the pick, the more and higher your contract is going to be. It's much different than the NFL, where it's more negotiated. It's pretty standard slot in. That's why you don't have all the contract disputes in the NBA versus baseball and football. Yet the NBA, those contracts are guaranteed. So Nigel decided not to go into the draft, decided to return to school. Good for him, right decision. And he has become a bit of an activist. Not to the Colin Kaepernick level with the Black Lives Matter movement, but on a different scale. And it came to a head when he attended ESPN's College Game Day. ESPN's College Game Day is essentially a traveling van that brings a party with it to the game of the week. So they choose whatever the biggest college football game is of that week, and they go 5 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock before East Coast games get going, and they essentially tailgate and put on a show in that town at the campus, and it is bananas. It is incredible. I've never been in person, but having watched it on TV a few times, it is crazy. Just a shit show of a party. And people are all in costumes, and they're waving flags, and they have signs, and it's just, everyone's trying to get on TV. Well, Nigel Hayes got on TV. He got on TV, tweeted before, saying, hey, can't wait to see ESPN Game Day. And then he showed up, and he had this sign. I'll post a photo on the website. A sign that said, broke college athlete. Anything helps. And then he had a handle, a Venmo handle, which if you don't know what Venmo is, PayPal owns them. It's essentially a mobile app payment system. So if you have this app, I have this app, I can send you $5, $20 connected to my bank account or another account, and I can send you money. Now, Nigel knew and knows that he cannot actually accept money, which is the first thing that people challenged him on. To which he stated all the money that was donated or all the money that was sent, that's why he set up a separate account, which actually was his buddy's. The handle was Broke Badger 1. All the money that was contributed to this account was going to be donated to a charitable organization. And he went on from there. Pointing out specifically how the Big Ten Conference and all of the money that they had made, saying in the previous year that they had made a 33% increase in total revenue of nearly $450 million, which sent roughly $30 million to each school. So Nigel's comparison was the Big Ten Conference, which I play for, makes $450 million, and yet all I get is a $160,000 scholarship. I was an out-of-state attendee. So if you go to the University of Wisconsin-Madison's website, that is what it adds up to, is $40,000 a year. Now, what he didn't say or talk about, and there's conflicting numbers out there, because I tried to find the exact number. There's conflicting numbers. I've heard it anywhere from $4,200 for a year to $1,500 per month. Big difference. But essentially, he gets a stipend on top of his scholarship in getting to go to school for free. He gets a cost of attendance stipend, which is meant to help take care of some of his living expenses. Really, anything else that he could probably need. Not to mention, by being a Division I basketball player, there's a few perks, if you aren't aware of or haven't seen. You essentially get free medical coverage. When you are a student athlete, you have full access to the training rooms. You have full access to all of the medical and training facilities. So it's as if you have free medical coverage. Don't think medical coverage is costly? Go look at the recent statistics and recent numbers that came out for what is going to happen with Obamacare. It's something like 50% increases of premiums. I can tell you on a very low bare bones minimum plan, when I was unemployed, it was something like $200 a month, which for people that are unemployed, that have no job, that have no income, don't have the ability to work, and it is now required, that's just for your medical coverage. That's not food. That's not putting a roof over your head. I mean, if you're talking about a bare bones place, let's say $600, $700 a month. $600 a month. We'll say $700 because I know in different cities that's going to be, you can't even touch that. $700 plus food. $300, $200. So up to $1,000. We're up to $1,200 just for food, shelter, and healthcare. Oh, forgot to mention, again, when you're an athlete, you get all the free swag and clothing and shit you can want. Now, granted, it's going to say the University of Wisconsin on it. But essentially, because this is just given to you for free, and for those that have children in youth sports, I've got a buddy, 2 daughters in competitive basketball, soccer. Yeah, how much do those uniforms cost? Because you're paying for all of it. So he gets all that stuff for free. All the shoes, all of his socks. I'm sure he's got to go buy his underwear, but if he really wanted to, he'd probably use his compression shorts. So you're getting free tuition, which covers your room and board, which covers your meal plan, which covers essentially medical, which covers essentially clothing. And then on top of that, you get, again, a range, $4,200 a year to $1,500 a month. Even if it's $4,200 a year, that's like $150 a week. You get $150 a week just for being on campus. Just for being on campus. That's like, it's like getting paid for going to jury duty, which would be fabulous. But just doing your job. You're already compensated for your job. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to pay you each time you show up. So the real crux of what pisses off Ed O'Bannon and Josh Rosen and Nigel Hayes that is getting this discussion going, again, is the NIL. Name, image, and likeness. Essentially, if they could make money off of this, which is illegal currently by NCAA standards, which would forfeit your ability to be an amateur athlete and participate, all of this essentially goes away. So there's some interesting numbers, before I get into my personal opinion, some interesting numbers that's provided by the census. There's, I guess we'll call it a white paper. It's called The Big Payoff: Educational Attainment and Synthetic Estimates of Work-Life Earnings. And it breaks down the numbers, and it gets into men, women, it gets into having a degree, not having a degree, working full-time, not full-time. There's a lot of statistics. A lot of statistics. But the numbers basically show, and of course there's always exceptions to the rules. There's plenty of stories of people that dropped out of high school or dropped out of college and are billionaires. Exceptions to the rule, though. But on average, again, it's an average. I don't care what Mark Zuckerberg's net worth is. It's obviously not large enough to sway these numbers. Because comparing somebody that gets a bachelor's degree to somebody that just graduates high school, believe it or not, I know it's probably hard for some recent college graduates or about to graduate college with their degree, but graduating with a bachelor's degree, average $52,000 annually. I can tell you, I was not making that. My first job out of college, now I wound up leaving them for several reasons, one in which I felt like I was being taken advantage of for the amount that I was being paid. I think it was something like $26,000. It felt low at the time. My real first quote-unquote big boy job, $40,000. That was some 4 years after that or so. So even at that, I haven't broke the average. But that's putting engineers and various other individuals that garner a much higher potential salary out of graduation than a advertising and marketing Bachelor of Arts degree. Bachelor of Science degree. I was initially an engineering student and then switched to business. So $52,000 for those that graduate with their bachelors. Nigel Hayes, if he goes into the NBA, is going to make a hell of a lot more than that next year. Somebody that just graduates high school, it's only $18,000, which equates to somewhere in the range of $2.7 million more in earned income as a result of getting your bachelor's instead of just your high school diploma. Doesn't seem like a lot, but compounding interest and everything else, it's huge. It's hard for me to fathom leaving that much money on the table. It's significant. Now, for those that go in, they get a professional degree because, interestingly enough, the people that make the most, according to the census article, are those that get a professional degree. They make in their lifetime, the average is about $4.8 million, which is understandable. They're getting something that is very specific to their needs, and therefore are rewarded for it. So before I share my thoughts, there's one, it's pretty lengthy, but one article by Theodore Ross on newrepublic.com called Cracking the Cartel. And it talks about why the NCAA should not pay student athletes. Fascinating article. But here's my opinions and why I personally disagree with Nigel Hayes. First and foremost, I don't believe that athletes should be paid. I don't. I don't believe that athletes should be paid, and I don't think it's a stretch. It's interesting because individuals, it's hard to get a perspective when you can never actually personally get that perspective yourself. For example, those that make over $250,000 a year annually, and I have some friends that are in that range that have to pay the additional taxes as a result of that. It is hard to understand from them. They're complaining for how much in taxes they have to pay. A buddy of mine states his personal goal, which makes perfect sense, is I want to pay as much taxes as I possibly can. Because that equates I'm making the most money I possibly can. If I'm paying a shit ton of taxes, I'm making a lot of money. But it's hard as somebody that isn't a part of the 1% to understand where the 1% are coming from. And so it is hard for me to put myself in the shoes of Nigel Hayes, of a Division I athlete, to know and understand what they went through and are going through. Because it is different. I realize my college education, my years in college, very different from them. It's so different as a student athlete. The statement was made by Nigel that when he made his comments at the Big Ten Conference Media Day, that he, along with other people, were there missing class, missing other opportunities as a result to the obligations that they had as being a student athlete. And that is the main argument, is that as a student athlete, it would be great because I spend all this time, I am almost like an indentured servant to the university. And I'm earning the university millions of dollars. Millions of dollars by playing this sport for you. And therefore, I should be compensated. I should be given my piece of the pie. To which I argue, how freaking selfish can you possibly be? What Nigel Hayes doesn't talk about is he doesn't talk about all the other students that have to pay, all the other students that are in debt, all the other students that, like him, have no money. The difference is he has all the things I already talked about. He has free college education, free health care, clothing, meal plan, bed, all those things for free. And yet there's other individuals that have none of that and yet have to pay. Have to pay. Yeah, all of that revenue, that basketball and football, because those are the programs that make money. Those are the programs that make money. I've heard recently about a university in my local area that brought on a football team. This is a small college university. They brought on a football team. This is a high-paying, something like $40,000 a year. They brought on a football team because at the level that it's at, they do not provide scholarships. So you must pay your own way to attend this university. They do not give athletic scholarships. You might be able to get a financial aid package, but typically speaking, when it's that much, you've got money. You're an affluent kid. And they brought on a football team to help increase the revenue to the university, to help increase their endowment fund. Because something like 52 players on a roster times 40,000, yeah, you do the math. Revenue driver. So you're right, Nigel. They are making money off of you. And then they're taking that money and providing scholarships for other people in the university that are outside of your teammates or the athletic department or any of the other athletic programs. You think women's soccer is bringing in any revenue? You think the cross-country team is bringing revenue in? No. It's not like it's a tax write-off. It's not like you can take a loss. Oh, yeah, we've got this. No, that's where programs go away. That's why universities don't have certain sports, because they don't have a revenue cash cow like this local university that established a football team. They established that football team so they could provide for every other sport on campus to cover the costs. Yeah, it's hard to fathom when your university is making $30 million. It's hard to fathom that. But Nigel doesn't talk about how much it costs, all the things cost to provide for what he gets. How about we talk about that? How about we talk about the numbers of how much it costs to feed you, to clothe you, to provide the medical coverage for you, to travel you. All those things. And then all the other athletes. Okay, let's not provide it. Let's silo it. Whatever basketball brings in, that's what basketball keeps. If you do that, every other sport's just going to be basketball and football. How selfish is that? And that's just the athletic programs. We're not even talking about the music department, the science department, any research. You think the research projects that are going on, if those don't get grants, you're not able to perform them. The only way those get done are by the endowments, by the money that is raised by the university. And the only way that the university makes that kind of money, aside from the tuition that every other student besides Nigel Hayes has to pay, is from the revenue brought in through his basketball program and the football program. It's very popular right now because of the election coming up to talk about costs and talk about the deficit and funding. It's very easy to look at your own personal situation. But what often isn't discussed, what isn't shown, the numbers aren't shown, is if you take something away, what are the implications and how is it affected? If we raise taxes by 10%, what are the implications? If we cut taxes by 10%, what are the implications? Not just for you individually. That's why everybody loved when George Bush gave that tax break. I can remember getting a check from him for X amount. Oh, wow, this is great. Yeah, and look at how much the deficit rose. So, no, we should not pay athletes. Because without athletes, without them, the university almost doesn't exist. At least not in the state and the form that it currently is. You want to know what it's like to not have a budget? To not bring in any revenue? Nigel, go play for a D-League team next year and see what the treatment's like. Completely different. You're a professional athlete. You are a professional athlete. Minor league baseball players, practice squad football, NFL players, they make jack. They're essentially making minimum wage, and you know from how hard you've had to work, how much effort you've had to put in just to get to this level, be on the precipice of making the NBA. What it would be like to be at the minor league level and not in the show. So no, I don't believe we should pay athletes. However, when it comes to NIL, name, image, and likeness, I don't know how you work it out with the NCAA. I don't know how you keep them in amateur. But I say go ahead. Go ahead. Don't route it through the NCAA. Don't route it through the university. If you're somebody like Johnny Manziel, where you're making arguably millions of dollars, Nigel Hayes probably would argue that too. Now, I don't know how you keep the corruption out, because this stuff is already going on. I don't know how, if name, image, and likeness, which is how you can essentially sell yourself and make money from that. And if you can, how you keep the corruption out of the NCAA, any more than there already is. Because now, if you can keep that out of the universities somehow, and this is something essentially on the side they can make, then it rewards the people that actually have the notoriety. And for those that don't, well, get better. Get better. If you're Johnny Manziel and you can sell merchandise, how about it? It's no different than being an entrepreneur, being in school, having your own business. Nobody says you can't do that. Go ahead, be an entrepreneur, sell your name, sell your image. But don't pay the athletes through the school. The school is already on the hook for enough. They're not employees, they're a student, for God's sakes. I know they might feel like they're an employee because they're at practice and all the commitments and, oh my goodness, they're not. Nobody said you had to be a Division I athlete. That was your choice. I have a hard time feeling sorry for you. Which is my third and final point. You have to understand that you're not going to get any sympathy coming your way from anyone. It's the same thing that I mentioned to start. That it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else when you don't have that perspective. It is very hard for individuals to know what it's like to be Donald Trump, to have that kind of net worth, to have that kind of power, to have that kind of name recognition. And so when you share your opinions, and Division III athletes are unable to understand your perspective, no, it's not your fault for being a Division I athlete, but you have to understand that they can't put themselves in your shoes. They're not going to be able to relate. That doesn't mean they're putting in any less time than you or any less effort. The difference is they might not be making as much in terms of their scholarship. They may be doing all the same things that you're doing and yet paying on top of that. So not only are they paying just as much as anyone else, but then they have the same level of commitments that you do. How is that any fair? That's where the NIL comes in. Okay, you have a known brand and entity at this point. And so you can profit off of that. If a Division III athlete is able to do that, more power to them. They should be able to profit off of that as well. But it's a challenge to have sympathy for somebody that has on paper so much. To essentially have $160,000 of free money, plus a stipend for every month that you're on campus, plus all the medical treatments, clothing, the food, the room and board. I'm sorry. There's plenty of other people out there that are getting much less and doing much more than you are. So in recap, we have discussed the topic of paying student athletes. We started with talking about Ed O'Bannon and the EA Sports lawsuit, settled in June 2014 for $60 million. And recently, on October 6, 2016, the Supreme Court decided they would not hear the case. An individual, UCLA quarterback Josh Rosen, posted, then took down an Instagram post criticizing his university, stating, "We're still amateurs though, gotta love nonprofits, hashtag NCAA. when UCLA signed a 15-year, $280 million apparel deal. And then we talked extensively about Nigel Hayes, University of Wisconsin senior basketball player, and his recent comments and display at ESPN College Game Day with a sign that read, "Broke college athlete, anything helps," with a Venmo handle on it to pay, and all of the proceeds would go to a charitable organization. The points Nigel made, that the 33% increase in revenue by the Big Ten, totaling nearly $450 million, with approximately $30 million or more sent to each school out of the Big Ten, and that his $160,000 scholarship that he received for 4 years, $40,000 a year, that he should be compensated fairly because of all that revenue that was coming in, that he was helping bring in because of his participation in sports. Yet he failed to mention the cost of attendance stipend he gets, the medical coverage he gets as a result of being a student athlete, the clothing, the food, the room and board. And it all adds up. The real crux of the disagreement is the name, image, and likeness. And if student athletes can make money off of that, the debate really goes away. The challenge, though, is how do you keep the amateur status? How do you regulate it? It's just like with states legalizing marijuana. How do you regulate it? The census put out a great article, The Big Payoff, Educational Attainment and Synthetic Estimates of Work-Life Earnings. And then an article that I highly recommend reading by Theodore Ross on newrepublic.com called Cracking the Cartel, Why We Shouldn't Pay Student Athletes. Then I gave my personal opinion. 3 points. Number one being that we should not pay athletes. Number two, that in the case of NIL, while there's a whole bunch of logistics to sort out, I have no problem with individuals getting what they can on their own name. Not being given revenue from the schools, because we discussed extensively how a program like the University of Wisconsin basketball team essentially helps fund the rest of the university, all the other scholarships, all the other programs, all the other athletic departments. And as a result of that, third and final point, you have to understand that no sympathy is going to come your way. It's difficult to put yourself in somebody's shoes when they are a 1%er, and you will never have those opportunities that they have. I want to thank everybody for listening in today. This has been a great, great week for posts, starting off with my good friend Mike Eford. My favorite episode, number 31, 25 Pounds of Excuses. For more information, though, on today's topic, please go to pausethinkconsider.com/studentathletes and go on to our Facebook page and share your thoughts. Do you agree with Nigel? Are you on the side of Ed O'Bannon that they need to be compensated? Or is there another variation to what I proposed and I suggested? I look forward to talking to you all again next week on Pause, Think, Consider.